First in our news, Chinese President Xi Jinping and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky have finally spoken over the phone, their first official conversation since Russia launched its offensive in Ukraine last year. And while the conversation centers around the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, it was also mentioned that Kiev upholds the One China policy. Let's find out more from Carlo de la Peña.
In the first phone call between Xi and Zelensky since the Russia-Ukraine conflict broke out, the Chinese president said now is the time to resolve the crisis. Various Chinese media reported that during their phone talks, Xi told Zelensky that dialogue and negotiations are the only viable way out. Furthermore, Xi was quoted saying China will neither watch the fire from the other side nor add fuel to the fire, let alone take advantage of the opportunity to make profits. Xi then urged all sides to remain calm and restrained when dealing with the possibility of the conflict spiraling into a bigger confrontation, insisting that no one wins a nuclear war. The Chinese president noted that China-Ukraine relations, after 31 years of development, have reached a level of strategic partnership, boosting the development and revitalization of both nations. He commended Zelensky for stating, on multiple occasions, the importance he attaches to developing the bilateral relationship and advancing cooperation with China. He also thanked the Ukrainian side for its strong assistance in the evacuation of Chinese nationals in 2022. Xi noted his proposals of 4 points about what must be done, 4 things the international community must do together, and 3 observations. On this basis, China released its position on the political settlement of the Ukraine crisis. This refers to the 12-point roadmap for peace between Russia and Ukraine. Zelensky, for his part, shared his views on the current state of the crisis and thanked China for providing humanitarian aid to his country. He also welcomed China's role in restoring peace and seeking a diplomatic solution to the crisis. Aside from the crisis between Moscow and Kiev, it can be noted that during the phone talks, Zelensky said that Ukraine is committed to the One China policy and hopes to advance all-round bilateral cooperation with China, open up a new chapter in their relations, and jointly safeguard world peace and stability. Following the talks, Zelensky released a statement calling it a long and quite rational conversation.
Дуже важливо, що Китай має однаковий з нами погляд на свободу мореплавства і торгівлі. Я поінформував пана Цзіньпіна про наші зусилля щодо відновлення морського експорту продовольства. І я почув слова підтримки нашої Чорноморської зернової ініціативи, її подовження, а також підтримку наших гуманітарних зусиль, зокрема програми «Зерно з України». Звичайно, суттєва частина розмови – це наші погляди на те, як можна відновити справедливий мир. Я представив українську формулу миру, її конкретні пункти. Ми домовились продовжити наші комунікації. Про такі розмови зазвичай говорять, що вони відкривають можливості. Зараз є можливість дати нову енергію нашим відносинам України та Китаю. Є можливість застосувати політичний вплив Китаю, щоб повернути силу принципам і правилам, на яких має триматися мир. Україна та Китай, як і абсолютна більшість світу, однаково зацікавлені у міцності суверенітету націй та територіальній цілісності. У дотриманні головних безпекових правил, зокрема щодо неприпустимості погроз ядерною зброєю та розповсюдження ядерної зброї світом.
Xi promised to send a special envoy to Ukraine as well as other countries to conduct what he calls an in-depth communication regarding a resolution to the ongoing conflict. It can be noted that China is positioning itself in the global state as a peacemaker. This is despite its ironclad ties with Russia. China has resisted international pressure to condemn Moscow and impose sanctions since the conflict began. The Chinese government has criticized Russia for attacking Ukraine, but also agreed with Russia that the expansion of NATO near the western border of Russia was among the major causes of the conflict. Reporting, this has been Carlo de la Peña, SMNI News.
The Xi Zelensky phone talks was met with a positive response from Russia, the United States, and the European Union with a little bit of caution. Jane Canita files this report.
The Xi Zelensky phone talks was welcomed by Russia. When asked about its reaction regarding the phone call, the Kremlin on Thursday said it welcomed anything that could bring the end of the conflict closer, but said Russia still needed to achieve the aims of their so-called special military operation in Ukraine. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Moscow was familiar with the details of what Xi and Zelensky had discussed and said their stances on the ongoing conflict were well known. Peskov said, and quote, "We are ready to welcome anything that could hasten the end of the conflict in Ukraine and Russia achieving all the goals it has set itself. As for the fact that they communicated, that is a sovereign matter for each of these countries and a question of their bilateral dialogue." Peskov was also asked if Russia and China had discussed restoring Ukraine to its 1991 borders during a recent visit to Russia by Chinese President Xi Jinping. To this, Peskov answered there were no such discussions. It can be noted that following the talks, Zelensky released a statement saying, and quote, "There can be no peace at the expense of territorial compromises. The territorial integrity of Ukraine must be restored within the 1991 borders." End of quote. But Zakharova praised China for its efforts to help restart meaningful negotiations. She said Russia's and China's visions for a path to peace were broadly in tune. However, she also said that the problem lies not with a lack of good plans. Zakharova said blamed Ukraine, saying that Kiev's unrealistic demands are standing in the way of peace negotiations. Zakharova is apparently referring to the eventual breakdown of Moscow-Kiev negotiations last spring, when officials on both sides had several rounds of meetings. The Foreign Ministry spokesperson said, and quote, "The Kyiv regime has so far not been receptive to any reasonable initiative aimed at a political and diplomatic settlement of the Ukrainian crisis. Its occasional agreement to hold negotiations is being tied to ultimatums and obviously unrealistic demands." As for the United States, National Security Council spokesman John Kirby called the Xi-Zelensky phone talks as a good thing, but cautioned that he had only learned about the call through news reports. The White House, on the other hand, welcomed the call but said it's too soon to tell if it could lead to a peace deal. In recent months, the U.S. has said that it was worried about Beijing providing weapons or ammunition to Moscow, although Beijing denies such accusations. Meanwhile, the EU reaction was clearly positive. French President Emmanuel Macron's office said he had pushed Xi to hold the call with Zelensky during a visit to Beijing this month. European Commission spokesman Eric Mamer called China's move as a long overdue first step in exercising its responsibilities as a UN Security Council member. Earlier, China named diplomat Li Hui its special envoy to Ukraine and other countries. She said the envoy would be tasked with conducting in-depth communication with all parties on the political settlement of the Ukraine crisis. Li was China's ambassador to Moscow from 2009 to 2019. Zelensky, meanwhile, has appointed former Strategic Industries Minister Pavel Ryabkin as Ukraine's new ambassador to China. Reporting, this has been Jane Conita, SMNI News.